You have told yourself it is over. You have said the words. You have acknowledged the ending. You may have even said them out loud, to yourself in the mirror, to a friend, to someone you trust. It is done. It is in the past. It is time to move forward. And yet, here you are, still thinking about it. Still turning it over in your mind. Still waking up in the middle of the night with a thought that pulls you back to something that already happened. Something that should, by every reasonable measure, be behind you. You go through your day. You work. You take care of your responsibilities. You smile when it is expected. You engage in conversations that have nothing to do with what is weighing on you. And from the outside, you look fine. You look like someone who is handling things, someone who has moved on. But inside, the landscape is different. Inside, there is a loop, a quiet, persistent replay of something you cannot seem to put down. A conversation, a moment, a feeling that keeps returning, uninvited and unwanted, no matter how many times you try to close the door on it. Maybe it is a relationship that ended. Maybe it is a friendship that dissolved. Maybe it is something someone said, or something they did, or something they failed to do. Maybe it is a version of your life that you expected to have but never did. Maybe it is a version of yourself that you lost somewhere along the way. Whatever it is, it has a hold on you. And the most frustrating part is not the pain itself. The most frustrating part is that you feel like you should be past it by now. You feel like enough time has gone by. You feel like you have done enough thinking, enough processing, enough working through it. And still, it lingers. You wonder what is wrong with you. You wonder why other people seem to recover faster. You wonder if there is something broken inside you that keeps you tethered to things that no longer exist. There is nothing broken inside you. What you are experiencing is not a malfunction. It is not a weakness. It is not a sign that you are incapable of healing or growing or letting go. What you are experiencing is the natural result of something that has not yet been fully understood. You are not stuck because you are weak. You are stuck because something inside you is still unfinished. Something is still unprocessed. Something is still waiting to be seen, acknowledged, and gently released. And you cannot release what you do not understand. This is the idea at the center of this audiobook, not a technique for forcing yourself to move on, not a set of steps to rush you past the discomfort, but a quiet, honest exploration of what is actually keeping you in place. Because the truth is, moving on is not something you do by trying harder. It is not something you accomplish through willpower or distraction or sheer determination. Moving on is something that happens naturally when you understand what you are still holding on to and why. You do not need to be fixed. You need to be understood, and sometimes you need to be the one who does the understanding. This audiobook is not going to rush you. It is not going to tell you to be strong. It is not going to offer you a timeline for healing or a formula for forgetting. It is going to sit with you in the place where you are and help you see it more clearly. Because clarity is not just a precursor to letting go. It is letting go. It is the beginning of it. And once it starts, the rest follows in its own time. So if you are listening to this because something in your past is still pulling at you, if you are listening because you have tried to move on and it has not worked, if you are listening because you are tired of carrying something that you feel should have been put down a long time ago, then you are in the right place. Not because this audiobook has magic answers, but because it has something more useful than answers. It has understanding. And understanding, as you will discover, is the one thing that has been missing. There is a phrase that you have probably heard more times than you can count. A phrase that has been offered to you as advice, as encouragement, as a solution to whatever pain you happen to be carrying. Just move on. It sounds so simple, so clean, so logical. The thing happened. It is over. Therefore, stop thinking about it. Stop feeling it. Stop letting it affect you. Move on. And the person saying it usually means well. They are not trying to dismiss you. They are not trying to minimize what you are going through. They are trying to help. They see you in pain, and they want it to stop. And the fastest way they can imagine for the pain to stop is for you to leave it behind. But here is what they do not understand, and here is what you may not fully understand yet either. Moving on is not an action. It is a result. You cannot move on the way you move a piece of furniture. You cannot simply pick up your feelings and place them somewhere else. You cannot decide, in a single moment, to stop caring about something that once mattered deeply to you. And the fact that you cannot do this is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that your emotions are real, that your experiences mattered, that the things you went through left marks on you, as they do on everyone, and that those marks do not disappear simply because someone tells you they should. The phrase "just move on" treats emotional experience as if it were a switch, on or off, holding on or letting go, stuck or free. But emotional experience does not work that way. It is not binary. It is layered. It is textured. It is woven into your memory, your identity, your sense of who you are and how the world works. And when something disrupts that sense, when something breaks the narrative you had been building about your life, the disruption does not simply end because the event ends. The disruption continues. It echoes. It reverberates through your thoughts and your feelings, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for much longer. This is not pathology. This is how the human mind processes experience, especially experiences that carry emotional weight, especially experiences that challenge your expectations, your trust, your sense of fairness, or your understanding of yourself. When someone tells you to just move on, they are asking you to skip the processing, to bypass the internal work that needs to happen before genuine release is possible. They are asking you to arrive at the destination without making the journey, and that does not work. It has never worked, because healing is not a destination you can teleport to. It is a path you walk, and the walking takes as long as it takes. Now, there is another version of this illusion that is even more insidious, and that is the version you tell yourself. You are harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be. When you cannot move on, you do not just feel the pain of the original experience. You feel the additional pain of self-judgment. You tell yourself that you are too sensitive, that you are being dramatic, that you are wallowing, that you should be over this by now. And that self-judgment creates a secondary wound. On top of the original pain, you now carry the shame of still feeling it. You are hurting, and you are also ashamed of hurting, and the shame makes the hurting harder to process, which makes it last longer, which creates more shame. This is a cycle, and it is one of the most common barriers to genuine healing. Because you cannot heal what you are ashamed of feeling. You cannot process an emotion that you are simultaneously trying to suppress. You cannot move through pain when you are also punishing yourself for being in pain. The first step, and it is a step that many people never take, is to stop telling yourself that you should be past it, to stop comparing your timeline to someone else's, to stop measuring your healing against an imaginary standard of how quickly a person should recover. There is no such standard. There is no universal timeline for grief, for loss, for disappointment, for betrayal, for heartbreak, for any of the countless forms of emotional pain that human beings experience. Your experience is yours. Your timeline is yours, and the fact that you are still feeling something does not mean you are behind. It means you are still processing. And processing is not failure. Processing is the work of healing. When you give yourself permission to process at your own pace, something subtle but important happens. The pressure decreases. The shame loosens its grip, and the emotional experience, no longer fighting against your resistance to it, begins to move more freely. This is a paradox that runs through the entire experience of letting go. The harder you try to force it, the more stuck you become, and the more you allow yourself to sit with what you are feeling, the more naturally the movement begins. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are a human being who experienced something real, and you are still carrying it because it has not yet been fully understood. That understanding is what this audiobook is here to help you develop, not quickly, not forcefully, but gently, at a pace that honors the reality of what you are going through. Because the truth is, you will move on, but not because someone told you to, not because you forced yourself, because you finally understood what you were holding on to. And that understanding changes everything. If you are unable to move on, it is not because you are choosing to stay stuck. It is because something inside you is still attached. Something is still connected to the experience, the person, the moment, or the version of reality that no longer exists. And until you understand what that attachment is, you will continue to feel its pull, not because you want to, but because attachment by its nature does not let go on its own. It holds on until it is seen, until it is named, until it is understood. So let us look at what you might be holding on to, not to judge it, not to fix it immediately, but simply to see it clearly. The first thing many people hold on to is the story they told themselves about how things were supposed to go. You had an expectation, a vision, a narrative about your life that included certain people, certain outcomes, certain trajectories. And when reality diverged from that narrative, when the person left, when the opportunity disappeared, when the path you thought was solid turned out to be temporary, you lost more than the thing itself. You lost the story, and losing a story can be more painful than losing the actual event. Because the story was not just about what happened. It was about who you were going to be. It was about the future you imagined, the life you were building in your mind, the version of yourself that existed within that story. When the story breaks, you are not just grieving the event. You are grieving the future that will never happen, the version of your life that will never unfold, the self you will never become within that particular context. This is a kind of loss that is rarely acknowledged. People around you may see the surface level change, the breakup, the job loss, the friendship ending, and they may think the pain is proportional to that specific event. But the pain is often much deeper than the event. It extends into the realm of identity, of meaning, of the quiet promises you made to yourself about what your life was going to look like. And when you hold on to the story, you hold on to the pain, because the story keeps the possibility alive in your mind. It keeps you imagining what could have been, what should have been, what would have been, if only. Those three words, if only, they are among the most powerful anchors in the human emotional experience. If only they had stayed. If only I had said something different. If only I had been enough. If only the world had cooperated with the plan. If only is not a thought. It is a tether. It ties you to a version of reality that does not exist. And the longer you hold on to it, the longer you remain in a place that is neither the past nor the present, but a painful space in between. The second thing people often hold on to is the meaning they assign to the experience. When something happens to you, especially something painful, your mind does not just record the event. It interprets it. It assigns meaning. It creates a narrative that explains why it happened, what it says about you, and what it means for your future. And those meanings, once created, become deeply embedded. They shape how you see yourself, how you see others, how you see the world. If someone betrayed your trust, the meaning you may have assigned is that people cannot be trusted. If a relationship ended, the meaning might be that you are not lovable. If you failed at something important, the meaning might be that you are not capable. These meanings are not facts. They are interpretations. They are stories your mind created in response to pain. And they are often distorted by the intensity of the emotion you were feeling at the time. But because they were created during a moment of vulnerability, they feel true. They feel like absolute, unshakable truths about who you are and how the world works. And as long as you believe them, you remain attached, not to the event itself, but to the meaning you gave it. You carry the interpretation forward long after the event has ended, and it colors everything that comes after. This is one of the most important things to understand about why you cannot move on. You may not be holding on to the person. You may not be holding on to the specific situation. You may be holding on to the meaning, the belief, the conclusion you drew about yourself from the experience. And that meaning, unless it is examined and challenged, will continue to shape your emotional life in ways you may not even be aware of. The third thing people hold on to is the emotional connection itself. Human beings are wired for connection, deeply, fundamentally, biologically wired. When you form a bond with another person, whether it is romantic, platonic, familial, or even professional, that bond creates neural pathways in your brain. It becomes part of your internal landscape, part of how you orient yourself in the world. When that bond is severed, the pathways do not disappear overnight. They remain active. They continue to fire. And every time they fire, you feel the pull of the connection that used to be there. This is why you can know, intellectually, that a relationship is over and still feel emotionally tethered to it. The intellectual understanding and the emotional reality are operating on different timelines. Your mind has accepted the ending. Your nervous system has not. And your nervous system is powerful. It does not respond to logic. It responds to pattern, to familiarity, to the deeply ingrained expectation that the person or the experience will still be there. And when it is not, there is a sense of disorientation, a sense of absence that goes beyond thought. It is felt in the body, in the chest, in the stomach, in the quiet ache that surfaces when you are alone and the distractions fall away. This is not sentimentality. This is neurobiology. You are not holding on to the person because you are weak. You are holding on because your brain has not yet rewired itself to accommodate the new reality. And that rewiring takes time. It takes experience. It takes repeated encounters with the present moment, without the person, without the situation, until the brain gradually adjusts. You cannot rush this process, but you can support it. And that support begins with understanding what is happening rather than judging yourself for it. The fourth thing people hold on to is the hope that things might change. Even when the ending is clear, even when the evidence is overwhelming, there is often a small, quiet part of you that still hopes. Hopes that the person will come back. Hopes that the situation will reverse. Hopes that some version of what you lost will be restored. This hope is not irrational. It is human. It is the mind's way of protecting you from the full weight of the loss. By maintaining the possibility, however faint, that things might change, your mind softens the blow. It creates a buffer between you and the finality of the ending. But that buffer comes at a cost, because as long as the hope is alive, you are not fully present in the reality of what is. You are living in a liminal space, somewhere between what was and what might be, and that space is deeply uncomfortable. It keeps you suspended, waiting, unable to fully grieve because you have not fully accepted. Hope, in this context, is not the empowering force that people often describe. It is an anchor, a gentle, seductive anchor that keeps you from moving through the pain and out the other side. This does not mean hope is wrong. It does not mean you are foolish for feeling it. It means that hope, when it is directed at something that cannot change, becomes a form of resistance, resistance to reality. And resistance, as you will continue to explore in this audiobook, is one of the primary forces that keeps you stuck. The fifth thing people hold on to is familiarity. Even when a situation was painful, even when a relationship was unhealthy, even when a period of your life was marked by struggle, there is comfort in the familiar. Your brain prefers what it knows. It prefers the patterns it has already mapped. It prefers the predictable, even when the predictable is painful, over the unknown. This is why you sometimes miss things that were not good for you. It is why you find yourself longing for a time that, objectively, was not happy. It is why the idea of moving into a new chapter, even a better one, can feel frightening rather than exciting. Because the new chapter is unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity, to the brain, signals potential danger. The brain does not care whether the change is positive or negative. It cares that it is different, and different triggers a subtle but persistent resistance. This resistance is part of what keeps you holding on. Not because the past was better, but because the past was known, and the known, however painful, feels safer than the unknown. So here you are, holding on to a story, holding on to a meaning, holding on to a connection, holding on to a hope, holding on to a familiarity. Some of these you are aware of, others are operating beneath the surface, beyond your conscious reach, and all of them are working together to keep you in place. This is not a problem to be solved immediately. It is a landscape to be understood, because understanding is what loosens the grip, not force, not will, not the desperate insistence that you should be past this. Understanding, quiet, patient, honest understanding, you are holding on to something, and the next step is not to drop it. The next step is to look at it, to see it clearly, to understand what it is and why it is still in your hands. And that looking, that seeing, is what the rest of this audiobook will help you do. There is something beneath the thoughts, beneath the memories, beneath the stories you tell yourself about what happened and why. Something that operates at a deeper level than the mind and its constant narration. That something is emotion, raw, unprocessed, unresolved emotion. And it is, more often than not, the real reason you cannot move on. You may have analyzed the situation thoroughly. You may have thought about it from every angle. You may have discussed it with friends, with family, with anyone who would listen. You may have replayed the events, examined the details, and constructed a comprehensive understanding of what happened. And yet, you still feel stuck. This is because thinking about something is not the same as feeling through it. The mind can process information. It can organize facts. It can construct narratives. But it cannot, by itself, discharge emotion. Emotion lives in a different layer of your experience. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, in the deep, wordless places that thought alone cannot reach. When an emotional experience is too painful, too overwhelming, or too confusing to be fully felt in the moment it occurs, something happens. The emotion gets stored. It does not disappear. It does not evaporate. It goes underground. It moves into the background of your internal life, where it continues to exert influence without your conscious awareness. This is what unresolved emotion looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not always obvious. It is a quiet pressure, a persistent undertone, a subtle but constant pull that keeps you oriented toward the past, even when your mind is focused on the present. You feel it as heaviness, as a tightness in your chest that appears for no apparent reason, as a wave of sadness that washes over you when you are not expecting it, as irritability that seems disproportionate to whatever triggered it, as a low-level anxiety that hums beneath the surface of your day. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. These are signs that something inside you is asking to be felt. And this is where things get complicated, because feeling is exactly what most people have been trained not to do. From a very young age, you received messages about emotions. Some of those messages were explicit. Do not cry. Be strong. Get over it. Toughen up. Others were implicit, absorbed through observation. You watched the people around you suppress their feelings. You noticed which emotions were acceptable and which were not. You learned, without anyone saying it directly, that certain feelings were inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unwelcome. And so you developed strategies. You learned to push feelings down, to distract yourself from them, to keep busy so that there was no space for them to surface, to intellectualize them, turning raw emotion into abstract analysis so that you could engage with the content without having to feel the weight. These strategies are not failures. They are adaptations. They are the coping mechanisms you developed to navigate a world that did not always make room for what you were feeling. And in many situations, they served you well. They allowed you to function, to keep going, to survive. But they also came at a cost, because every emotion that was pushed down, distracted away, or intellectualized did not actually disappear. It was simply deferred, stored for later, placed in a holding pattern that, over time, became a kind of emotional backlog. And now, when something happens that disrupts your life, when a loss occurs or a change unfolds or a wound is reopened, that backlog surfaces. Not just the emotion from the current event, but all the deferred emotion that was waiting behind it. The grief you never fully expressed. The anger you never allowed yourself to feel. The fear you never acknowledged. The sadness you pushed aside because the timing was not right. This is why a single event can feel so disproportionately painful. It is not just the current loss you are feeling. It is the accumulated weight of every loss you did not fully process. Every ending you did not fully grieve. Every feeling you did not fully allow. And this accumulated weight is what makes moving on feel so impossible. Because you are not just trying to move past one thing. You are trying to move past a lifetime of deferred emotional experience. This is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to help you understand the scale of what you are carrying. Because when you understand the scale, you stop judging yourself for the difficulty. You stop wondering why this is taking so long. You stop comparing your pace to someone else's. You begin to have compassion for yourself. Not the shallow, performative kind of compassion that says everything is fine. The deep, honest kind that says this is hard, and it makes sense that it is hard, and I am going to give myself the space to move through it at whatever pace I need. Now let us talk about what unresolved emotions actually need. They need to be felt. Not analyzed, not explained, not justified. Felt. This is a distinction that most people miss. When you are in emotional pain, the instinct is to figure it out, to understand why you are feeling what you are feeling, to construct a narrative that makes sense of the experience. And while understanding has its place, it is not a substitute for the direct experience of the emotion itself. Feeling an emotion means allowing it to exist in your body without trying to change it, fix it, or rush past it. It means sitting with the sadness without immediately reaching for a distraction. It means letting the anger be present without trying to reason it away. It means acknowledging the fear without insisting that you should be braver. This is uncomfortable. Sometimes deeply uncomfortable, because these emotions were deferred precisely because they were too much to handle at the time, and returning to them now can feel like reopening a wound that you thought had closed. But the wound did not close. It was covered, and the covering prevented it from healing properly. The only way to heal it is to uncover it, to let air and light reach it, to feel the sting of exposure, and then to allow the natural process of healing to begin. This is not a one-time event. It is not a single cathartic moment that resolves everything. It is a gradual process. A series of small encounters with the emotion, each one allowing a little more to be felt, a little more to be released, a little more to be integrated. Some of these encounters happen in quiet moments, when you are alone, when the distractions have faded, when the emotion rises without warning and you find yourself suddenly flooded with feeling. In those moments, you have a choice. You can push it back down, as you have done so many times before, or you can stay. You can let the wave move through you. You can feel its full weight without running from it. And if you stay, something happens. The wave crests, it peaks, and then it begins to recede. Not because you forced it away, but because you let it complete its natural arc. This is how emotions work. They rise, they crest, and they fall, but only if you let them. If you suppress them before they peak, they do not recede. They loop, they return, they cycle back again and again, each time asking for the same thing: to be felt, to be acknowledged, to be allowed to complete their natural movement. This is what your unresolved emotions are doing. They are cycling, they are returning, they are asking to be felt. And every time you push them away, you reset the cycle. You send the emotion back to the starting point, where it waits until the next opportunity to surface. This is why you keep feeling the same thing. Not because you are stuck, but because the emotion has not been allowed to finish. And when you begin to allow it, when you begin to sit with the feeling instead of running from it, the cycle starts to shift. The intensity decreases. The frequency lessens. The emotion begins to move from the center of your experience to the periphery. Not because you forgot, but because you felt, and in feeling, you completed something that was left unfinished. There is another dimension to unresolved emotion that deserves attention, and that is the role of emotions you are not willing to admit you feel. Sometimes, the emotion that is keeping you stuck is not the one you think it is. You believe you are sad, but underneath the sadness is anger. You believe you are angry, but underneath the anger is fear. You believe you are over it, but underneath the surface calm is a grief so deep that you have not yet found the courage to look at it. These layered emotions are common, and they are part of what makes the process of resolution so complex. Because you cannot resolve what you do not acknowledge, and acknowledging the deeper layers requires a willingness to be honest with yourself that goes beyond the usual level of self-awareness. It requires asking questions like these. What am I really feeling? Not what I think I should be feeling, not what I want to be feeling, but what is actually present, right now, beneath the surface. Am I angry at someone I feel I should have forgiven? Am I relieved about an ending I feel I should mourn? Am I grieving something I am ashamed to admit I lost? Am I afraid of something I do not want to name? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary, because the emotions you will not name are the ones that hold you most tightly. They are the ones that operate in darkness, beyond the reach of your conscious attention. And bringing them into the light, simply naming them, simply acknowledging their existence, begins to dissolve their power. You do not have to solve these emotions. You do not have to fix them. You just have to see them. Let them be seen. Let them be real. Let them exist without judgment or resistance. Because once they are seen, once they are acknowledged, they begin to move. They begin the process of completion that was interrupted when they were first suppressed. And that movement, slow and imperfect as it may be, is the beginning of letting go. Not the kind of letting go you can force, the kind that happens when the emotional work has been done, when the feelings have been felt, when the cycle has been allowed to complete. That is real letting go, and it begins here, with the simple, courageous act of feeling what you feel. There is a word that appears frequently in conversations about healing and moving forward. A word that is offered as advice, as wisdom, as the key to everything: acceptance. Accept what happened. Accept the loss. Accept the reality. Accept it and move on. And if you have ever been told to accept something that caused you deep pain, you know how hollow that advice can feel. Not because it is wrong, but because it makes acceptance sound like a decision, like something you can simply choose to do. And acceptance, real acceptance, is not a decision. It is a process. A difficult, often painful process that requires far more than willpower or determination. It requires something you may not be ready to give, and that is perfectly all right. Because before you can accept, you need to understand why acceptance is so difficult. And the reasons are deeper and more layered than most people realize. The first reason acceptance is difficult is that acceptance feels like agreement. When someone tells you to accept what happened, a part of you resists. Because accepting it feels like saying it was okay, like endorsing it, like agreeing that it should have happened. And you do not agree. You do not think it was okay. You do not think it should have happened. You think it was unfair, or wrong, or unnecessary, or cruel, and accepting it feels like surrendering your right to feel that way. But acceptance is not agreement. These are two entirely different things. Acceptance is the recognition that something happened, that it is real, that it occurred, regardless of whether it was right or fair or just. Acceptance does not say this was good. It says this is true. It says this happened. And no amount of wishing, resisting, or replaying will make it unhappen. This distinction matters enormously. Because when you understand that acceptance does not require approval, the resistance begins to soften. You can accept that something happened and still believe it was wrong. You can accept a loss and still grieve it. You can accept a betrayal and still be angry about it. Acceptance is not the end of your feelings about what happened. It is the beginning of a new relationship with those feelings. A relationship based on reality rather than resistance. But even with this understanding, acceptance remains difficult. And that leads us to the second reason. Acceptance is difficult because it requires you to give up control. When something painful happens, one of the first things your mind does is search for a way to undo it, to fix it, to find the lever that, if pulled, would reverse the outcome and restore the way things were. This search is not always conscious. Sometimes it manifests as replaying conversations in your mind, imagining what you could have said differently. Sometimes it manifests as fantasizing about alternative outcomes. Sometimes it manifests as planning confrontations, apologies, or gestures that might change things. All of these mental activities have one thing in common. They are attempts to maintain control over something that has already happened. They are the mind's way of refusing to acknowledge that the outcome is final, that the damage is done, that no amount of mental rehearsal can change the reality of what occurred. And giving up that sense of control is deeply uncomfortable, because control is safety, control is predictability, control is the belief that you can influence outcomes, shape events, and protect yourself from harm. When something happens that demonstrates your lack of control, when life delivers an outcome you did not choose and cannot reverse, it challenges one of your most fundamental beliefs. The belief that you are the author of your own experience. The belief that if you do the right things, think the right thoughts, and make the right choices, you can prevent pain. Acceptance means acknowledging that this belief, however comforting, is not entirely true. It means sitting with the reality that some things happen beyond your control, that some outcomes cannot be influenced, that some pain cannot be prevented, and that acknowledgement, while ultimately liberating, feels deeply threatening in the beginning, because it exposes a vulnerability that you would rather not see, the vulnerability of being human, of being subject to forces and events that you did not choose and cannot change. The third reason acceptance is difficult is that it means letting go of the possibility. As long as you resist acceptance, as long as you hold on to the belief that things might change, that the person might come back, that the situation might reverse, you maintain a connection to the possibility of a different outcome. And that possibility, however faint, is comforting. It gives you something to hold on to, something to hope for, something that softens the sharpness of the loss. Acceptance takes that possibility away. It says clearly and finally, this is how it is, not how it might be, not how it could be, how it is. And that finality is one of the most painful things a person can face, because finality means there is no going back, no undoing, no second chance, no alternative ending. You are left with what is. And what is may not be what you wanted. This is why people often oscillate between acceptance and denial. They move toward acceptance, feel the full weight of the finality, and then retreat back into the comfort of possibility. They know, on some level, that the possibility is an illusion, but the illusion is preferable to the pain of fully seeing reality. This oscillation is normal. It is part of the process. It is not a sign of weakness or failure. It is the mind's way of approaching a truth that is too heavy to absorb all at once. It approaches, retreats, approaches again, each time getting a little closer, staying a little longer, absorbing a little more. Eventually, the oscillation slows, the retreats become less frequent, the approaches become longer, and the truth, the full, unadorned truth of what happened, becomes something you can look at without flinching. That is acceptance. Not a single moment of surrender, but a gradual settling into reality. The fourth reason acceptance is difficult is that it asks you to grieve. Grief is one of the most misunderstood emotional experiences. Most people associate grief exclusively with death, but grief is the natural response to any significant loss. The loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, the loss of a friendship, the loss of a dream, the loss of a version of yourself that you valued. Grief is the emotional acknowledgement that something important is gone. And acceptance, because it brings you face to face with the reality of the loss, inevitably invites grief. This is uncomfortable for many reasons. Grief feels heavy. Grief feels slow. Grief does not follow a predictable schedule. It shows up when you least expect it. It lingers longer than you want it to, and it asks you to be with your pain in a way that feels unproductive, as if you should be doing something more useful than simply feeling sad. But grief is not unproductive. It is essential. It is the process through which your emotional system recalibrates. It is how your internal world adjusts to accommodate a reality that has changed. Without grief, there is no true acceptance, and without acceptance, there is no genuine movement forward. So when acceptance invites grief, and it will, the most helpful thing you can do is let it in. Not dramatically, not with the expectation that it will look or feel a certain way, but simply, quietly, with the same patience you would extend to someone you love who is hurting, because you are someone who is hurting, and you deserve that patience. The fifth reason acceptance is difficult is that it challenges your identity. When something significant happens in your life, it does not just change your circumstances, it changes how you see yourself. Your identity, the story you tell about who you are, is shaped by the events of your life. And when those events shift dramatically, your identity shifts with them. The person who was part of a couple is now alone. The person who had a career is now starting over. The person who trusted is now guarded. The person who felt capable now questions their abilities. These identity shifts are disorienting. They challenge the continuity of self that most people depend on for stability. And acceptance, because it asks you to acknowledge the new reality, also asks you to begin integrating a new identity. An identity that includes the loss. An identity that has been reshaped by what happened. This is not a small thing. It is one of the deepest forms of emotional work a person can undertake. Because your sense of self is not something you change easily. It is woven into every aspect of your life. Your habits, your relationships, your expectations, your beliefs. Changing it, even gradually, requires a willingness to be in transition, to be in the uncomfortable space between who you were and who you are becoming. And most people do not like being in transition. They want to be settled. They want to know who they are. They want the ground beneath them to feel solid, but the ground has shifted, and acceptance means standing on the new ground even when it feels unstable. This is hard. It is genuinely, deeply hard. And if you are in this place right now, if you are struggling to accept something that has happened, know that the struggle is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is a sign that you are doing it at all. Acceptance is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. It is one of the most demanding forms of emotional labor that exists. And the fact that you are even considering it, even approaching it, even listening to these words, means that you are already further along than you think. You do not have to accept everything right now. You do not have to arrive at full acceptance today. You just have to be willing to move toward it. One small step at a time. One honest acknowledgement at a time. One moment of sitting with reality at a time. That is enough. That has always been enough. There is a natural instinct when you are in pain to want to skip to the end, to get to the part where it does not hurt anymore, to fast forward through the discomfort and arrive at peace. This instinct is understandable. No one wants to sit in pain any longer than necessary, and the desire for relief is not a weakness. It is a fundamental part of being alive. But there is something that needs to happen before relief is possible. something that most people overlook in their rush to feel better. You need to understand what you are carrying. Not just know it, not just acknowledge it in passing. Understand it, deeply, clearly, with a level of honesty that goes beyond the surface and reaches into the layers beneath. Because understanding is not just a precursor to letting go, it is the mechanism of letting go. When you truly understand what you are holding onto, the grip begins to loosen, not because you forced it, but because clarity itself is a form of release. This is one of the most important ideas in this audiobook, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. You have probably tried to let go before. You have probably told yourself, I need to stop thinking about this. I need to stop caring. I need to stop feeling this way. And you may have succeeded for a while. You may have pushed the thoughts away, distracted yourself, occupied your mind with something else. But the feelings came back, the thoughts returned, the weight reappeared. Because you were not letting go, you were suppressing. And suppression is not release. It is temporary displacement. The thing you pushed down is still there. It is just waiting for the next quiet moment to surface. True release happens differently. It does not come from pushing away. It comes from moving toward, from looking at the thing you are carrying and seeing it with complete clarity. From understanding not just what it is, but why it is still there, what need it is serving, what function it is performing in your inner life. Because everything you hold on to serves a purpose. Even the painful things, even the things you wish you could let go of, they are there for a reason. And until you understand that reason, releasing them feels impossible, because you are trying to let go of something without knowing why you are holding it. So let us explore this. Let us look at some of the reasons you might be holding on to something painful. You might be holding on to it because it keeps you connected. If the thing you are holding onto involves another person, the pain itself may be serving as a form of connection. As long as you are grieving, as long as you are thinking about them, as long as the emotion is alive inside you, the relationship is not fully over. The pain is a thread, a link, a way of staying connected to someone who is no longer present in your life. This is not irrational. It is deeply human. The fear of fully releasing the pain is, at its core, the fear of fully losing the person. Because if the pain goes, what is left? If you stop thinking about them, does that mean they are truly gone? Does it mean the relationship meant nothing? Understanding this fear is essential, because it reveals the hidden logic behind your attachment. You are not holding on to the pain because you enjoy it. You are holding on to it because you are afraid that letting go of the pain means letting go of the love, of the connection, of the meaning. But this is not true. Letting go of the pain does not erase the love. It does not diminish the significance of what you shared. It does not mean the person did not matter. It means that you are allowing the experience to settle into its proper place in your history. A place of importance, a place of value, but not a place of active suffering. You can honor what was without being imprisoned by it. You can carry the love without carrying the pain. But you can only do this when you understand why the pain has been so difficult to release. You might also be holding on to something because it protects you. This sounds counterintuitive. How can pain be protective? But it can, and it often is. If you were hurt by someone or something, the pain serves as a reminder, a warning, a barrier between you and the possibility of being hurt again. As long as the wound is fresh, as long as the pain is active, you remain on guard. You do not let people in. You do not take risks. You do not open yourself to the kinds of experiences that led to the pain in the first place. In this way, the pain becomes a kind of armor. It is uncomfortable, but it is familiar, and it serves a function. It keeps you safe. Or at least, it keeps you feeling safe, which is not exactly the same thing. Understanding this protective function is important, because it means that letting go of the pain is not just an emotional challenge, it is a safety challenge. It asks you to lower your defenses, to step out from behind the wall you have built, to be vulnerable again. And vulnerability, after you have been hurt, is one of the most terrifying things you can imagine. So you hold on to the pain, not because you want to suffer, but because suffering feels safer than the alternative, safer than openness, safer than trust, safer than the possibility of being hurt again. This is a pattern that runs deep, and it cannot be overcome by simply deciding to let go. It can only be addressed through a slow, careful process of rebuilding your sense of safety, a process that begins with understanding why the pain felt necessary in the first place. You might also be holding on to something because it gives you an identity. When a painful experience becomes a significant part of your story, it begins to shape how you see yourself. You become the person who was betrayed, the person who was abandoned, the person who failed, the person who lost. These identities are painful, but they are also stable. They give you a framework for understanding yourself and your place in the world. They provide a narrative that, however uncomfortable, at least makes sense. And letting go of the pain means letting go of the identity. It means stepping into uncertainty, into the question of who you are without the wound, into the unfamiliar territory of a self that is not defined by what happened to you. This is not a small transition. It is one of the most profound shifts a person can make. And it requires not just emotional work, but existential work. The work of reimagining yourself, of constructing a new narrative, of finding out who you are when the pain is no longer the central feature of your story. This work takes time, it takes patience, and it takes a willingness to sit with the discomfort of not knowing who you are while the new identity emerges. But it is possible, and it begins, as everything begins, with understanding. Understanding why you are holding on, understanding what the holding serves, understanding what you are afraid will happen if you let go. These understandings do not need to be perfect. They do not need to be complete. They just need to be honest. And honesty, in this context, is not about having all the answers. It is about being willing to ask the questions. Why am I still carrying this? What is it doing for me? What would change if I set it down? What am I afraid of? These questions may not produce immediate answers. They may sit with you for days or weeks before anything becomes clear, and that is fine. The questions themselves are doing the work. They are opening doors that have been closed. They are inviting awareness into spaces that have been dark. And awareness, once invited, does its own work. It illuminates, it clarifies, it gently reorganizes your internal landscape in ways that thought alone cannot. You do not need to force understanding. You need to invite it, and then be patient while it arrives, because it will arrive, not on your timeline, not according to your plan, but in its own way, in its own time, with a clarity that feels less like a breakthrough and more like a quiet settling, a quiet knowing, a quiet readiness to begin the process of release. And when that readiness appears, you will not need to be told what to do. You will feel it, not as a dramatic moment of transformation, but as a gentle shift, a loosening, a softening of the grip. That is what understanding does. It softens the grip, not by forcing your fingers open, but by helping you see that what you are holding no longer needs to be held. Release is not a moment. It is not a single event that happens and is done. It is a process, a gradual, uneven, sometimes messy process that unfolds over time and rarely looks the way you expected it to. This is important to understand, because if you are waiting for the moment when you suddenly feel free, when the weight lifts all at once, and you step into a new chapter with clarity and ease, you may be waiting for something that does not exist. At least, not in the way you imagine it. Release happens in layers, in small, almost imperceptible shifts, in moments where you realize that you went an hour without thinking about it, then a morning, then a day, in moments where the memory surfaces and it still hurts, but the hurt is different. Softer, less sharp, more like an echo than a blow. These shifts are easy to miss, because when you are in pain, your attention is naturally drawn to the pain. You notice what hurts. You notice the weight. You notice the sleepless nights and the heavy mornings. And you may not notice that the weight is slightly lighter today than it was last week. That the sleepless nights are slightly less frequent. That the mornings are slightly easier. But they are. If you are doing the work of understanding, if you are allowing yourself to feel, if you are moving toward acceptance rather than away from it, the shifts are happening. They are real. And they are building towards something, even if you cannot see it yet. This is where patience becomes essential. Not the patient endurance of gritting your teeth and waiting for it to be over, but the patient awareness of trusting the process even when you cannot see the progress, because the process is working. Even when it does not feel like it. Even when you have a bad day after a week of good ones. Even when the pain returns with unexpected intensity after you thought you were past it. The process is not linear. It spirals. It moves forward and then circles back. It progresses and then pauses. It advances and then retreats. This does not mean you are going backward. It means you are going through. And going through is not the same as going in circles. Each time you revisit the pain, you are not in the same place you were before. You are in a deeper place, a more aware place, a place where the emotion can be felt more fully and released more completely. Think of it like peeling an onion. Each layer reveals the next, and each layer requires its own attention, its own time, its own tears. You cannot peel all the layers at once. You can only work with the one in front of you, and when that layer is done, the next one appears. This can feel discouraging. It can feel like the work will never end, but it does end. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but gradually. The layers become thinner, the emotions become less intense, the grip becomes less tight, and one day, you realize that the thing you were carrying is still there, but it is no longer heavy. It is part of your story, but it is no longer the center of it. It is a chapter, but the page has turned. That realization is release. Now let us talk about what supports this process, because release, while it cannot be forced, can be facilitated. There are conditions that make it easier, and there are practices that, when adopted gently and without pressure, create the environment in which release is more likely to occur. The first is self-compassion. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It is not wallowing. It is not making excuses. It is the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer to someone you love who is going through a difficult time. When a friend is hurting, you do not tell them to get over it. You do not tell them they are taking too long. You do not judge them for their pain. You sit with them. You listen. You offer presence without pressure. Self-compassion asks you to do the same thing for yourself, to sit with your own pain without judgment, to acknowledge the difficulty without trying to rush past it, to say to yourself, "This is hard, and I am doing my best, and that is enough." This sounds simple, but for many people, it is one of the hardest things to practice, because the inner critic is loud, and the inner critic has been trained over a lifetime to demand more, to push harder, to judge harshly, to equate self-compassion with weakness. But self-compassion is not weakness. It is the foundation of resilience. Because you cannot heal in an environment of self-attack. You cannot release pain while you are simultaneously punishing yourself for feeling it. Self-compassion creates the safety that release requires. It tells your nervous system that it is okay to feel, that it is okay to be vulnerable, that it is okay to be in process. And that permission, that simple, radical permission is often the missing piece. The second support is presence. Release happens in the present moment, not in the past, where the pain originated, not in the future where you hope to feel better. In the present, in the here and now, in the direct, immediate experience of what you are feeling right now. This is why practices like mindful breathing, quiet reflection, or simply sitting still and noticing what is happening inside you can be so powerful. They bring you into the present moment. They interrupt the mental replay that keeps the past alive, and they create a space where emotion can move through you without the interference of story, analysis, or judgment. You do not need to meditate for hours. You do not need a formal practice. You just need moments. Small, intentional moments where you stop, notice what you are feeling, and allow it to be there, without trying to change it, without trying to understand it. Just noticing, just being with it. These moments accumulate. They build a capacity for presence that, over time, becomes one of your most powerful resources, because presence is the environment in which release occurs naturally, not through effort, through allowing. The third support is expression. Emotions that are felt but never expressed can remain stored in the body and the mind, even after they have been acknowledged. Expression gives them a pathway out. It externalizes what has been internal. It gives form to what has been formless. Expression can take many shapes. Writing about what you are feeling, speaking about it to someone you trust, creating something, art, music, movement, that gives shape to the emotion. Even crying, that most basic and often resisted form of expression, is a powerful mechanism of release. You do not need to express perfectly. You do not need to articulate your feelings with precision. You just need to let them out, to give them a voice, a shape, a form that allows them to move from inside you to outside you. This is not about performing your pain. It is about externalizing it, giving it somewhere to go, and in doing so, reducing the internal pressure that keeps you stuck. The fourth support is time. There is no substitute for time, no technique, no insight, no practice can replace the slow, steady passage of days and weeks and months. Because time is the medium through which all healing occurs. It is the space in which new experiences accumulate, new patterns form, and new ways of being take shape. You cannot rush time, and you do not need to. You just need to trust it. To trust that the passage of time, when combined with the inner work you are doing, will produce the result you are seeking, not on your schedule, but on the schedule that is right for you. Release is coming. It is already in motion. You may not be able to see it yet, but it is there, forming beneath the surface, moving toward you at a pace that is calibrated to the depth of what you experienced and the honesty with which you are engaging with it. Trust the process, trust yourself, and trust that the weight you are carrying will not be carried forever. Because it will not. It will lighten. It will soften. It will shift from a burden to a memory, from a wound to a scar, from a scar to a story, and from a story to a part of you that no longer defines you, but simply informs you. That is release, and it is already underway. There is a question that sits at the edge of all this inner work. A question that you may have been carrying alongside the pain, the analysis, the understanding, and the slow process of release. The question is this: what comes next? And the honest answer, the answer that may surprise you, is that you do not need to know. Moving forward is not a plan. It is not a destination. It is not a set of steps that you execute in a precise order. Moving forward is what happens when the weight lessens enough for movement to become possible again. It is not something you do. It is something that arises. This is an important distinction, because when you believe that moving forward requires a plan, you add pressure to a process that works better without it. You start trying to figure out who you should become, what you should do next, how you should feel. And that trying, that efforting, can actually slow down the natural unfolding that was already in motion. Moving forward, in its truest sense, is not an act of will. It is an act of allowing yourself to begin engaging with the present moment again, allowing yourself to notice what interests you, allowing yourself to feel the small, tentative stirrings of curiosity, energy, and desire that signal the return of vitality. These stirrings are subtle. They do not arrive with fanfare. They arrive quietly. A flicker of interest in something you had forgotten about. A moment of laughter that catches you off guard. A thought about the future that, for the first time in a long time, does not carry dread or sadness. These are signs, not signs that you are healed in some complete, final sense, but signs that the inner landscape is shifting, that the weight is redistributing, that space is opening up for something new. And the most important thing you can do in response to these signs is to notice them. Not to force them into something larger, not to build an entire new life around them overnight. Just to notice, to acknowledge, to say, gently and without expectation, there is something new here. Because new things do not grow well under pressure. They grow well in open space, in patience, in the kind of quiet attention that does not demand or direct, but simply welcomes. You have been through something. You have carried something heavy, and you have done the difficult, unglamorous work of sitting with it, feeling it, understanding it, and gradually allowing it to shift. That work has changed you, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a real, deep, fundamental way. You are not the same person you were before the experience, and you are not the same person you were when the pain was at its peak. You are someone new, someone who has been shaped by what happened, yes, but also by how you responded to what happened, by the courage it took to feel rather than avoid, by the patience it took to wait rather than force, by the honesty it took to look at yourself clearly, even when what you saw was uncomfortable. That is growth, not the kind of growth that comes from achievement or ambition, but the kind that comes from surviving something difficult and allowing it to teach you something about yourself. And that growth, quiet as it may be, is the foundation of what comes next. You do not need to reinvent yourself. You do not need to create a brand new identity. You do not need to have a 5-year plan or a grand vision for your future. You just need to start where you are, with what you have, in this moment. Start small. Start with the things that are right in front of you, the daily routines that ground you, the relationships that nourish you, the activities that bring you even a small measure of peace or satisfaction. These are not distractions from your healing. They are expressions of it. They are the ways your life begins to reassemble itself around a new center of gravity. That reassembly does not happen all at once. It happens gradually, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small, ordinary moment at a time, and there will be days when the old pain resurfaces, days when you feel like you have gone backward, days when the progress you thought you had made seems to evaporate. These days are normal. They are part of the process. They do not erase the work you have done. They are just reminders that healing is not linear, that it has its own rhythm, its own tempo, its own way of unfolding that does not always match your expectations. On those days, be gentle with yourself. Return to the practices that have supported you. Return to the understanding you have gained. Return to the patience that brought you this far, because you have come far. Even if it does not feel like it, even if the distance between where you started and where you are now is invisible to the eye, it is there. You have traveled it, and it counts. Moving forward is not about leaving the past behind. It is about integrating it, taking what it taught you and weaving it into the fabric of who you are becoming, not as a wound, but as wisdom, not as a burden, but as depth, not as something that happened to you, but as something that became part of you. You do not need to forget. You do not need to pretend it did not happen. You do not need to act as if the pain was meaningless. It was meaningful, deeply, profoundly meaningful. And the meaning does not disappear when the pain fades. The meaning remains. It becomes part of your story, part of your understanding of yourself and the world. And that understanding, hard-won and honest, is not a loss, it is a gain, one that only you can fully appreciate, one that makes you more compassionate, more aware, more real. Moving forward naturally means allowing yourself to carry the meaning without carrying the weight. It means honoring the past without being imprisoned by it. It means being open to what comes next without needing to know exactly what it will look like. Because what comes next will not look like what came before. That is life. Continuing, unfolding, offering you once again the chance to participate, not perfectly, not painlessly, but fully, and that is enough. You have been listening for a while now. You have traveled through ideas that are not easy to sit with. You have explored the feeling of being stuck. You have examined the illusion that moving on should be simple. You have looked at what you might be holding on to and why. You have confronted the role of unresolved emotion and the difficulty of acceptance. You have considered the possibility that understanding, not force, is the true path to release. And you have begun to see what moving forward might look like when it is allowed to happen naturally. That is a lot of ground to cover. And if you are feeling something right now, whatever it is, that feeling is valid. It deserves your attention. It deserves your respect. Because this audiobook was never about giving you a formula. It was about giving you a mirror. A quiet, honest mirror in which you could see yourself more clearly. Not the version of yourself that the world sees, but the version that exists beneath the surface. The one that carries the weight. The one that replays the memories. The one that lies awake at night wondering why it still hurts. That version of you is not broken. That version of you is processing, healing, working through something real at a pace that is right for them. And if there is one thing you take away from everything you have heard, let it be this. You do not have to rush. You do not have to perform healing for anyone else's benefit. You do not have to meet a deadline. You do not have to arrive at peace by a certain date. You do not have to prove to yourself or anyone else that you are over it. You just have to be honest about where you are and willing to keep going from there. Honesty is the most underrated tool in healing, not the dramatic kind of honesty that makes for good stories, the quiet kind, the kind where you sit with yourself and admit what you are really feeling, where you name the thing you have been avoiding, where you stop pretending and simply allow yourself to be human. That honesty is not always comfortable, but it is always productive, because every honest acknowledgement is a step toward clarity, and clarity, as you have explored throughout this audiobook, is the ground on which release is built. You may not feel ready to let go today, and that is fine. Readiness is not something you can manufacture. It is something that builds slowly and organically as understanding deepens and awareness grows. Your only job right now is to stay open, open to feeling, open to understanding, open to the possibility that the weight you are carrying will not be carried forever. Because it will not. The pain will soften. The memories will settle. The grip will loosen. Not because you forced it, but because you did the quiet, courageous work of looking at what was there, of feeling what needed to be felt, of understanding what needed to be understood. And that work, invisible to the outside world, is some of the most important work a human being can do. You are doing it right now, simply by being here, simply by listening, simply by being willing to engage with the parts of yourself that most people spend their whole lives running from. That takes courage, even if it does not feel like courage, even if it feels like nothing more than sitting still and listening to words. It is courage, and it matters. You do not have to force yourself to let go. You only have to understand what you are still holding on to. And when that becomes clear, when the understanding settles and the emotions find their completion and the acceptance takes root in its own time, moving on happens naturally, not as a dramatic leap, but as a gentle turning, a quiet shift, a moment when you realize that the ground beneath you is steady again, that the air feels lighter, that the future, which for so long felt like an empty room, is beginning to fill with possibility. That moment is coming. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it is coming. And when it arrives, you will be ready, not because you were perfect, but because you were honest, because you were patient, because you stayed. That is enough. That has always been enough.